Picture the scene inside a sanctuary for the elite. The rhythm is pulsing, the atmosphere is electric, and then, in a single heartbeat, a heavy silence descends upon the room. The reason is visceral. Michael Jordan is standing mere inches from Rich Paul, and the expression he wears is devoid of any warmth. This is not a casual exchange of pleasantries between power players. His relentless grip is fixed on Paul's shoulder, radiating a dormant violence, while his eyes carry that same cold, predatory focus he famously leveled at Detroit before dismantling their dynasty in 1991. The greatest to ever play the game has finally exhausted his patience with the man who has spent over 10 years systematically chipping away at his monument. Rich Paul stood frozen, appearing as though he wished for the floor to swallow him whole because his theoretical arguments and rehearsed media narratives dissolve instantly when he is forced to stare directly into the eyes of the sport's living deity. To understand the weight of this moment, you must understand the provocative rhetoric Paul has been circulating in the shadows. He has gone from tethering Jordan's rise to the socio-economic despair of the 80s to flatly denying his standing at the pinnacle of basketball history. If you believe the debate over the greatest of all time is merely a comparison of championship jewelry and statistical spreadsheets, you are overlooking the deeper ideological war being waged out of sight. Klutch Sports appears to be executing a calculated campaign to revise historical narratives before LeBron James concludes his career, a strategy that is beginning to reek of desperation. To comprehend why Jordan was prepared to disrupt a high-profile Miami gala for this confrontation, one must examine the inflammatory commentary we have been subjected to for years. It began with the infamous Platinum Antlers theory in 2023, where Paul argued on a broadcast that James faced a more arduous journey simply because he had to pursue Jordan's ghost from his teenage years.
I just think LeBron's Antlers is in platinum and Michael's may be in gold. Why? Because when you think about, he had to be compared to Mike. Who did Mike have to be compared to?
Talk about it.
This is a psychological sleight of hand, attempting to convince us that media expectations are a heavier burden than the physical reality of obliterating every opponent on the hardwood for 15 seasons. He suggests that navigating the pressure of a magazine cover is somehow more difficult than surviving the physical brutalization inflicted nightly by the Bad Boy Pistons. This is purely a corporate maneuver. If one cannot mathematically surpass the 6 unblemished championships, the alternative is to diminish the difficulty of achieving them. Yet, the narrative took a significantly darker turn on January 6th, when Paul appeared on Max Kellerman's show and offered perhaps the most perplexing analysis on record. He utilized a whiteboard to deconstruct the success of the Jordan brand, arriving at a conclusion that ignored the 6 rings or Jordan's astute business acumen entirely. Instead, he attributed the phenomenon to the crack epidemic, a statement that defies belief. Paul asserted that the Jordan mythology was not forged through athletic brilliance, but rather fueled by the street culture's fixation on status and narcotics during the 80s and 90s.
These people had basically not even careers or high-paying jobs. They just had hustles. So now when you bring forth the crack epidemic, it created a revenue stream amongst a group of consumers that, number one, would have never had that dollar to spend.
MJs because they wanted to be like Mike. They wanted to be like Max, who had the BMW and the cute girl.
And you used me as an example because I was sitting in front of you. You said, it's not that Michael Jordan did this, it's that the influencer who had the BMW or whatever you said, like Max with the fly girl and the BMW. So you're saying
what
that
I was saying was
before
the
there
hustler.
He is reducing the most iconic athlete in human history to a beneficiary of circumstance, someone who merely capitalized on a societal crisis. He even ventured to suggest that entertainers like Martin Lawrence and Will Smith contributed more to the footwear's legacy than the man whose name is on the box. This felt like a calculated strike at the very soul of the brand, an empire worth $4 billion built upon the foundation of unrelenting excellence. Yet here is Rich Paul, on a media crusade, telling the world that this monumental success was merely the result of street-level marketing and fortunate timing. That was the precise moment The silent observer in Michael Jordan ceased to exist. One cannot insult a man's life work and his supporters simply to elevate a client's reputation. Anyone familiar with Jordan understands that his legacy and his fan base are two lines that are never to be crossed. Rich Paul assaulted both, and it is crucial to remember that he is not merely an agent, he is the chief architect of the LeBron James brand. He understands that to raise his client's standing, he must dismantle the giant casting the shadow, which explains his excavation of the 1980s for justifications. He argues that Jordan dominated the market simply because there was no social media landscape to fragment the public's attention. He wields the concept of timing like a weapon, implying that if a prime LeBron James were transported to 1988, he would be the one commanding the $4 billion empire. However, this ignores the reality that Jordan had to single-handedly invent the very concept of the global athletic superstar. Before his arrival, NBA players were viewed simply as athletes in uniforms. After him, they were revered as cultural deities. Paul attempts to frame this as cultural synergy, but it is a transparent effort to devalue the sheer labor Jordan invested to reshape the world. He even suggested that Jordan's business acumen was limited to understanding royalties, as if that minor detail somehow diminishes the magnitude of the legacy. On the contrary, it proves he was more intelligent than his peers, including the very client Paul represents today. Yes, including LeBron. But this is where the narrative shifts from controversial to genuinely manipulative. He went further, spinning this narrative that Jordan had a cakewalk, claiming the legacy is a fraud simply because he didn't play in the era of the 24/7 news cycle. But he didn't stop there. He insisted social media would have exposed Jordan's off nights. Ironic, coming from Rich Paul, the man who practically engineers the media landscape in LeBron's favor, now complaining about Jordan having it easy. The strategy became transparent when Paul tried to claim Jordan was shielded by critics like Peter Vexi, acting as if the 90s media was some kind of fan club. But anyone who actually lived through that era knows that is a complete fabrication.
That's a whole nother thing that Mike never had to deal with because his hardest critic was probably Peter Vexi.
Yep. Straight up.
You see what I'm saying?
If it isn't Jordan got lucky with the era, it's Jordan was just a product of the system, or he had an easier path. It is a slow drip poison designed to corrode the very foundation of Michael Jordan's mythology. The goal is simple. When LeBron retires, his ascension to undisputed greatest feels natural. But Michael Jordan spent his life reading defenses, and he saw this trap coming from a mile away. So when Jordan gripped that shoulder in Miami, he was essentially reminding Rich that you can buy the podcasts, you can buy the media, and you can bring as many charts as you want, but you cannot buy the feeling the world had watching him in '98. And soon, when we really dig into the raw data of that era, you will see that the reality is actually far more terrifying than the myth. But if you think that confrontation at the charity event was just a hallway spat, wait until you hear the full account of what went down and what Jordan told him about the future of the Klutch empire. Insiders suggest Jordan executed a maneuver that might leave LeBron without a single ally in the league office. It all unfolded at a charity function hosted inside an undisclosed VIP lounge in Miami. It was January, and the bass was thumping so hard you could feel it rattling in your teeth. The room was swarming with NBA legends and Hollywood A-listers, the 1% of the 1%. But the second Jordan stepped into Rich Paul's orbit, that corporate Hollywood shield absolutely shattered. Look, Rich Paul is used to being the most untouchable man in the room. He is the architect, the operator who moves LeBron like a chess piece while hiding behind carefully crafted PR statements. But Jordan is the eye of the storm. He is a predator who does not need a marketing team to validate his authority. According to sources close to the situation, Michael did not even have to raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood there with that unlit cigar, looking down at Rich as if he were back in Akron selling jerseys out of a trunk. Jordan leaned in and delivered a line that reportedly sent a shockwave through the entire lounge. You can buy the media, and you can buy the shoes, but you do not get to buy my history. With one sentence, Jordan dismantled everything Rich Paul has spent 15 years building. Rich was reportedly left standing there, drink in hand, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floorboards, He is accustomed to handling general managers and owners who play by corporate handbooks. But Jordan does not play by those rules. And he wasn't finished. He leaned in closer to deliver the final blow. You don't get to rewrite my life just because you can't sell yours. That was the ultimate power move. It was a death blow to the entire Klutch strategy. Jordan essentially said, if LeBron's story was truly superior, you wouldn't have to spend every podcast attempting to tear mine down. And let's be honest, he wasn't lying. In the end, Jordan released his grip, took a dry pull of his cigar, and walked away with the presence of a king. But if you think Jordan stopped there, you do not understand the black cat. While Rich was attempting to salvage his dignity, Jordan was already working the phones. Rumor has it he executed a play that will leave LeBron isolated from the league office before his retirement tour even begins. And speaking of LeBron, if you think this narrative was solely Rich Paul's creation, you are mistaken. While Rich is out front with the whiteboards and the spin, LeBron himself has been playing a much subtler, passive-aggressive game for years. He won't say it to Michael's face, but he has been dropping these subtle jabs for a long time. It became undeniable after that 2016 Finals comeback. We all remember the clip from his More Than an Athlete series where LeBron looked directly into the camera and declared himself the greatest player of all time. That one right there made me the greatest player of all time. To me, that felt incredibly insecure. Michael Jordan played 15 seasons, won 6 rings, and never once felt the need to tell a reporter, hey, by the way, I'm the GOAT. He just went out and took it. By explicitly crowning himself, LeBron was effectively trying to relegate Jordan to number 2. It reeks of insecurity. That is the kind of thing you only say when you know the world isn't convinced. And then there is the ghost comment. Back in a 2016 Sports Illustrated interview, LeBron said his biggest motivation was this ghost he was chasing. The ghost who played in Chicago. On the surface, that sounds like respect. But if you look deeper, calling Jordan a ghost is the ultimate backhanded compliment. A ghost is not a flesh and blood person. It is a haunt, a myth, a shadow that isn't really there. By framing Jordan as a ghost, LeBron was trying to reduce Jordan's legacy to an old wives' tale, something that only exists because people choose to believe in it, rather than a tangible reality. It is a classic Klutch maneuver. Attempt to turn the 90s into a fairy tale era so LeBron's 23 seasons feel more grounded in reality. We need to dismantle the myth of longevity, not with opinions, but with cold, hard truth. If you need evidence that Jordan sees right through the facade, look no further than the fallout with Kendrick Perkins. Perkins was once deep in the inner circle, a loyal soldier receiving shipments of unreleased sneakers long before the public ever saw them. But the moment his allegiance wavered, the moment he publicly declared another man the greatest, the pipeline was severed immediately.
I used to get boxes in the mail all the time of the Jays before they even hit the stores. I started my media career. As soon as I said that LeBron James was the GOAT, those boxes stopped coming.
Understand this. Jordan isn't just a retired Titan idling away his days on a private fairway. He remains a ruthless competitor who takes deep offense when beneficiaries of his empire attempt to undermine it. Pick your allegiance, but don't expect to walk in the master's footwear while actively plotting to dismantle his throne. What's truly revealing here is the attempt to feign ignorance, to play the role of the innocent admirer.
Who, me and Michael?
Jordan?
Yeah, we're a good spot. We don't talk.
But the reality is stark. Jordan engages only with those he genuinely respects, and his silence here speaks volumes about what he perceives as inauthentic. There is a reason Jordan remains the singular, unapproachable deity of the sporting world. He understands that offering an inch of access simply provides fuel for the PR machine's next narrative production. Recall our earlier discussion regarding the relentless emphasis on tenure and longevity. We need to dissect why there is such a desperate need to market endurance as the ultimate metric of greatness. Because when you isolate the zenith of a career, the absolute maximum output of human potential, the comparison falls apart. They aren't occupying the same stratosphere. The camp relies on accumulation and total sums to bridge a gap that skill alone cannot. The reason is simple. Volume is the only category where the argument holds any water. But in the arena of true legends, glory isn't measured by how long you manage to punch the clock. We measure greatness by the devastation you inflicted on your enemies. So let us examine the year 1988. In the annals of the sport, this stands as perhaps the single most dominant individual campaign ever recorded. Jordan didn't merely capture the MVP, he claimed Defensive Player of the Year honors while simultaneously destroying the league with 35 points a night. To clarify, he was unequivocally the world's most lethal scorer and its most feared defender in the same breath. He topped the charts with 3.16 steals per game, rejecting shots at the rim with the ferocity of a 7-footer. Contrast that with James, who, across 23 seasons, has never once taken home that defensive hardware. 2 decades of pursuit never yielded that summit. His nearest miss came in 2013, falling short against Marc Gasol. His agency has labored to paint that loss as a robbery, but the historical data tells a different story. Gasol was the foundation of Memphis's elite defense, backed by advanced metrics that validated his impact. In just 15 years, Jordan earned first-team All-Defense honors 9 times, nearly double what James achieved in a far longer career. This distinguishes a capable defender from a predator who existed to break his opponent's will on every inch of the floor. Jordan secured 10 scoring titles in 11 full campaigns with Chicago. James has managed just 1 in 23 years. Now, observe the manipulation at play, specifically how his camp attempts to reframe offensive dominance as a flaw. They take to the airwaves claiming that Jordan's relentless scoring burden somehow hindered those around him. It is a bold claim, considering that supposed liability produced a flawless 6-for-6 record on the game's biggest stage. Conversely, the touted playmaking approach has yielded 6 championship defeats, yet the most egregious revisionism concerns the defensive rules. James frequently cites the lack of zone defense in the 90s, suggesting the lane was wide open for the taking. This is a complete fabrication that ignores the brutal reality of the era and the specific strategies designed to stop one man. Detroit's entire defensive philosophy was predicated on physical punishment, intended to break the body before the game ended. Picture driving into the paint knowing a forearm to the chest or a strike to the head was not just possible, but guaranteed. In an era devoid of modern spacing or protected movement, it takes audacity to suggest the path was effortless. While defenders were tethered to their assignments, they were also permitted to physically impede progress with their hands. Drop a prime Jordan into today's protected game, where contact is strictly forbidden, and he would transcend the title of mere scoring champion. Drop him into the modern game, and 50 points a night becomes routine. Yet, Rich Paul leans on the concept of timing to systematically dismantle the grit of the 90s. In reality, that era was a battlefield. Between Pat Riley's Knicks and the Bad Boy Pistons, the physicality was unmatched, almost criminal. Jordan didn't merely withstand that punishment, he rose above it. We need to dismantle the weakest narrative spun by the Klutch camp, the notion that walking away in 93 was an act of quitting. They frame that hiatus as a failure of endurance, especially when contrasted with LeBron's 23-year marathon. But that perspective fundamentally misunderstands the psychology of a conqueror. Jordan didn't bow out. He completed the mission, he reached the peak, surveyed the landscape, and realized there were no dragons left to slay in 93. He returned, only to walk away as a champion again in 98, as if the trophy belonged to him by blood. LeBron, meanwhile, is grinding into his 40s, compiling statistics to bolster a cumulative resume. Jordan didn't require a 23-year runway to establish his supremacy. He cemented his legend in just 15. As the exchange in that Miami lounge made clear, you can linger in the league indefinitely, but never mistake longevity for permission to disrespect the king. The equation is simple. Recall how Rich Paul attempted to twist Jordan's scoring dominance into a liability? He remains on the media circuit, hitting every podcast microphone, desperate to confine Jordan to a one-dimensional box.
I said, yeah, if I'm starting a team, I'm taking LeBron number 1. I'm still taking LeBron number 1. And I would take MJ to take the last shot.
Consider the 1991 finals. This was the definitive changing of the guard, Jordan staring down Magic Johnson. The prevailing storyline back then mirrored Rich Paul's current rhetoric that Jordan was merely a selfish gunner. So, how did this supposed egoist respond? He posted 31.2 points, 11.4 assists, and 6.6 rebounds per game, all while executing with 55.8% precision from the field. To frame the magnitude of that performance, he did not merely defeat Magic, he outpassed the greatest playmaker in history during his own finals series. Rich, naturally, has no interest in discussing that 11.4 assist average. He prefers to double down on the distortion, claiming LeBron holds the crown simply because he has worn it longer.
But we know who the best player ever is. His name is LeBron James.
True students of the game recognize that the 2025-2026 media cycle resembles a coordinated PR campaign rather than a basketball season. Whispers pervade the league regarding strategic plans within networks like ESPN. Familiar voices relentlessly amplifying the longevity narrative. They want you to accept that accumulation is synonymous with dominance. But you cannot manufacture a legacy. This is precisely why that charity gala in Miami signals a shift in the tide. It signals the end of the silence, the era where Jordan would simply light a cigar and rise above the noise. So, I leave you with this question. Who has earned your faith? Do you stand with the man who went 6 for 6? Never allowed a finals to bleed into a Game 7 and broke the will of every rival in his path? Or do you listen to the agent who requires a whiteboard and a global media tour to convince you that his client is the king? In the 90s, defenses had to triple-team Jordan just to contain his fury. In 2026, Rich Paul has to triple-team the media just to keep James in the conversation.